Redditors who worked at defunct stores, BlockBuster, Circuit City, etc. When did you realize they were done for? Worked at Best Buy for a while, got fired and then went to work at Circuit City. I knew it the second I walked into that store. 6 months later we were told it was closing. Best Buy constantly updated fixtures and layouts designs. Everything was bright and new. I imagined that Circuit City looked exactly like it did when it first opened. I worked at Lone Star Steakhouse. There's not too many of them left anymore, if any. I worked an open to close shift one night, by myself. Had 2 tables and made $12. I started a career elsewhere shortly after that, and 6 days after I left Lone Star for the new position the restaurant closed. The employees weren't told either, they showed up and the place was shut down by corporate already. Edit. Did some follow-up research. Last one in the US closed in October 2019. Still one running apparently in Guam of all places. Guess I'll have to plan a visit. Get me a Texas Rose. Second edit. The Lone Star Grill franchise in Canada is not the same as Lone Star Steakhouse in America. Just found that out. Worked at a Hollywood video. When there was a solid week with less than 10 customers, I knew it wasn't going to last. Luckily it was just my job for while I was in college. I worked at a Radio Shack in college. I knew they were done for before I even applied. I just needed some pocket money for weed and a WoW subscription. I worked in the warehouse at Sears in college until 2007. When I graduated, we were regularly running out of inventory and everything seemed like it had to be ordered in on a case-by-case basis. I was the person in the back that loaded the toolboxes, treadmills, snowblowers, etc. into vehicles. When you're running out constantly of your top revenue-generating pieces, something isn't right. Also, they didn't even bother updating inventory. I had a friend there that walked off with a couple of big screens and nobody ever even noticed. I worked at BlockBuster. I was there when they started BlockBuster Total Access to compete with Netflix. You add movies to your account, they mail the DVDs to you. You can return the DVDs to any BlockBuster. As soon as they scan them in, you'll get the next movies on your list sent out so you didn't have to wait as long for turnaround. Even better, you were able to rent a movie at the BlockBuster for free that you turned it in at. It was actually a great service. You could get tons of movies and it was really easy to get people interested in signing up for it. Foot traffic in stores increases. The amount of candy and snacks we sold increased. We even had an uptick in paid movie rentals for non-new releases cause parents would exchange their movie for a new release and get a couple for the kids as well. Then they started to change it. Restricted the amount of movies you can exchange each month. Different plans had different restrictions on what movies you could get, how many new releases, etc. It became really difficult to explain to customers because there were so many restrictions in place. After a bit you couldn't exchange a movie in store at all. Foot traffic died again and the chain along with it. I worked at BlockBuster, but I quit a few years before they finally bit the dust. Probably we could tell that they were going under when they started chasing Netflix and copying them rather than trying to find a way to actually do something new. Of course, plenty of employees on I Hate BlockBuster swore they saw it coming for years. Also, when nobody could get a decent manager to stay on, that was a pretty big red light. I worked for Kodak in the mid-1990s. Digital photography was emerging, but emulsion chemical photography was already moving to mini labs, away from wholesale mass production. Management were always talking down digital and talking up our long-term future. Kodak even brought out a new film format in about 1995, with a magnetic strip on the film. High-tech mate among workers. Most felt we were doomed, but equally most of the older people, and many who had been there 20 or more years, seemed to think they'd be okay for a few more years. Our CEO used to come and give speeches about how we had a future as long as we did not seek pay rises. He later became CEO of Telstra, Australia's largest telecommunications company. There, he made expensive takeovers of White Pages, the paper phone directory, and Trading Post, a classified ad newspaper. This was with the internet already in common use. He later became head of NBN Co., the quasi-government company responsible for building the country's high-speed broadband network, a much criticized, mismanaged project noted for complacency and lethargy and a lack of ambition. There are some who want a nuclear power industry in Australia, and the man's name is often mentioned to head that. My startup went under. But here were the signs. The only work was busybody work assigned by bosses and not coming in from the queue. We missed payroll 1 week. We asked when we were getting shut down. They said everything was fine. Bosses had locked door meetings for 2 weeks and were CS to everyone. During that time, Row F started 2 months after the first payroll miss. The company is now completely shuttered. My boss was a effing idiot and had this wild-ass plan of selling the company with no product or revenue. We tried pitching alternatives and driving revenue so that the company would succeed, and we were talked down to at every opportunity and told we know nothing about sales or running a successful company. Wasn't a chain store, but I knew the bar I was working at was done for when they made us find the least moldy piece of lettuce and wash the off to use on the burgers instead of buying more. My friend used to work at Circuit City in high school. Management literally never paid attention to anything. We stole hundreds upon hundreds of dollars worth of stuff from there without anyone ever noticing. When they did inventory, my friend said they had 0,000 worth of shrink 0,000. When he said that they were one of the better stores when it came to shrink, I knew they were doomed. I think they went out of business about 3 to 4 years later. I briefly worked at Kmart after my family moved to a new state. It was readily apparent that higher management was just trying to minimize their expenses until the stores were forced to close so they could have the largest post-bankruptcy payday they could muster. It was sad too, because most of our customers would tell us how much they loved us over places like Walmart. If they had decided to invest in Kmart and actually gave a damn, it could have made a comeback and been a decent competitor. I didn't work for one, but I could see Borders bookstore going down when Barnes & Noble came out with the Nook after Amazon had Kindle. Borders missed the boat. It's too bad because I like Borders better than Barnes & Noble. Not an employee, but when BlockBuster declined to buy Netflix for what would have been a pittance compared to its stock price now, I knew they were done because they were stuck in the past and too complacent. It's not defunct at this time, but I worked for Pier 1 in the 90s and more recently as a holiday job. In the 90s we opened a fair number of credit cards, but in 2018 we were instructed to politely hound people about opening a credit card, which I hated doing. I don't know if they're done for, but it's rough out there in brick and mortar retail. There was much more sense of a solid business in 1998. I worked for a national camera store that went into administration. I was on my day off and found out via watching the news. Spent the rest of my day off job hunting. Worked at Sears Auto Center back when I was in college in 2008. I knew they were done for as soon as I started working there. Writing was on the walls, they were always losing money and stock was always limited. Articles we released year after year how they were top 10 companies to go out of business. I didn't care. It was a steady paycheck for a simple job while I was getting through college. I worked at Babies R Us for 3 years. For part-timers, Our hours would fluctuate based on sales from the previous weeks. If we had a bad week, as much as 75% of us would get called off future shifts. It was so random. I could have 10 hours one week and 34 hours the next. It felt like the employees were not the only ones living paycheck to paycheck. Genuinely curious as to how AB Games is still around. This was family-owned restaurant, not a chain, but I knew they were done for when I quit. In my entire time there I only remember feeling like it was really truly busy a couple times. More often than not we were slow, or completely dead. The owner made some foolish decisions. He would frequently give the regulars free food and beer. It was also a microbrewery. Since I was just the peon dishwasher, I was usually tasked with closing the kitchen solo, because me being there 3x as long when two people get it done in half the time makes total sense. Half the time when the owner was bartending he would have me turn the deep fryer back on to make free S for his friends. Hooray for having to stay another hour just to cost the owner money. There were people in the front of house and back of house dating. Drama always ensued. There were people that hated each other forced to work alongside each other. Poor direction from the top down. The owner would allow his wife to wait tables when she was high off her face on pills. Before I worked there she got a DUI and had her license revoked. When it was reinstated he bought her, on credit, a brand new 0K Mercedes. She totaled it while drunk. Roughly a week later, I had 2 paychecks bounce. Good wait staff didn't stay. The morning crew for the kitchen trickled out over a few months. I quit in January 2008. It was closed by May. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to hear more of the best posts.